Deep in the frozen wilderness of Siberia, 5 hunters on horseback move through the jungle, tracking a group of escaped slave laborers. The slaves, starving and desperate, are trying to hunt an animal just to survive one more day. But before they can, the hunters find them and open fire. Chained at the wrists and ankles, the laborers have nowhere to run. One by one they fall. Only one man escapes the first wave of bullets, a slave named Paul. He dives into the roots of a tree and disappears from sight. The hunters finish off the wounded on the ground, then do something chilling. They cut off the ears of every dead laborer, collecting them like trophies. An older hunter in the group makes it clear. One slave is still missing, and they won't get their full reward until he's dead too. Terrified, Paul bolts from his hiding place and is spotted instantly. Gunfire erupts around him as all 5 hunters give chase. He sprints toward the edge of a cliff and throws himself into the river below. The hunters gather at the ledge, firing down into the water. But their leader, Marcos, stops them. Wasting bullets on a man already drowning makes no sense, he says. If Paul somehow survives, they'll simply cross the river and finish the job on the other side. Paul does survive. He drags himself out on the far bank and keeps running. Marcos and his men search the shoreline but come up empty. 2 of the hunters, Mendez and a man called Jasper, want to turn back. This particular slave clearly isn't worth the trouble. But Marcos won't let it go. Paul, he insists, was different from the others. Special. Killing him and taking his ears is non-negotiable. Mendez pushes back, reminding Marcos that they'd been warned to stay out of this stretch of jungle. Marcos brushes it off. This land belongs to no one. Jasper corrects him. It belongs to the gold diggers. Marcos doesn't care. He sweetens the deal with extra coin, and the hunt continues. Meanwhile, Paul stumbles through the collapsing jungle, half mad with hunger and thirst, until he spots a house by a lake. He breaks in and tears into a loaf of bread on the table, only to freeze when he hears coughing. An old sick man is lying inside. Paul grabs an axe, ready to defend himself, but the old man tells him to relax and asks what happened to him. The old man shares his own story. His son left years ago looking for work and never came back. Then, sensing his time is near, he calls Paul closer and whispers something urgent. Instructions meant for his son whenever he returns. It's the old man's final request, to be dressed in clean clothes for his burial. In exchange, Paul can stay in the house until the son arrives. Paul agrees. Elsewhere in the jungle, the old man's son, Daniel, is resting before heading home. Marcos and his men cross his path and, recognizing him, ask if he's seen an escaped slave. Daniel refuses to help killers. When Marcos's man Samuel tries to intimidate him at gunpoint, Daniel's companion shoots the hat clean off Samuel's head as a warning. Daniel tells Marcos to move along and mind his own business. Marcos threatens him but ultimately leaves. Back at the house, Paul is preparing the old man's body for burial exactly as promised. Daniel arrives just as the ritual is underway and, misreading the scene, knocks Paul unconscious. He and a woman named Maria bury his father themselves. When Paul wakes up, he's tied up. Daniel confronts him. He must be the escaped slave everyone's hunting. Paul doesn't deny it. If wanting freedom from slavery is a crime, so be it. Maria studies him closely as he speaks. Daniel softens slightly. He tells Paul he saw how carefully he'd cleaned and dressed his father's body. Paul explains it was the old man's dying wish and asks to be untied. He's done nothing wrong. Daniel presses further. Did his father tell him anything else before he died? Paul admits the old man mentioned a pit, one filled with enough gold to set someone up for life. He also asked if the old man had offered Paul a share. Says he has no interest in gold. He only wants to get home. Satisfied, Daniel cuts him loose and demands to be shown the pit. Pit behind the house, Daniel explains his father dug it years ago, though he never believed anything was actually in it. Tells Paul they'll start digging the next morning. Toward the water afterward, Paul asks if Daniel knows where the nearest railway line is. The only way home. Daniel strikes a deal. Find the gold first, and he'll help Paul find the railway. Paul with no better option, agrees. Inside, Maria is cooking. Paul tries to ask her name, but Daniel steps in first. Maria can hear and understand everything, he explains, but she can't speak. She communicates only through gestures. Over the meal, Daniel tells Paul just how lucky he is to be alive. No one has ever escaped Marcos and his men before. They kill for money, then mutilate the bodies, cutting off ears and hanging the corpses upside down, as a brutal calling card, so that everyone in the region knows exactly whose handiwork it is. Paul asks why anyone would go to such lengths of cruelty. Daniel's answer is simple. It's a signature, a warning. That night, Marcos and his men make camp, convinced Paul won't last much longer out here on his own. Back at the house, Daniel finally opens up about Maria's past. Her mother was a slave too, killed while trying to escape. Her father was killed even earlier. Left with nothing, Maria ended up working in a bar just to survive, until her mother was killed as well. Paul asks why they never took her to a doctor to help her speak. Daniel's answer is blunt. There are no doctors out here. This isn't the city. And besides, in his eyes, a slave's job is simply to be a slave. The next morning, Paul and Daniel begin digging into the pit, pulling up mud from the bottom, inch by inch, in search of whatever the old man left behind. Watching from a distance, Samuel and Mendez spot Paul near the pit. Mendez tells Samuel to stay put and keep eyes on him while he goes to update the rest of the gang. Unaware he's being watched, Daniel keeps digging, breaking through the hardened mud until pieces of gold start coming loose. It's enough to convince him there's a real fortune buried down there. Before long, he's filled an entire bag. Mendez reports back to Marcos. Daniel is digging for gold. Marcos assumes as much. Mendez draws a hard line. Their job is to hunt down the last escaped prisoner, not rob a gold pit. If Marcos wants to go after the gold, he wants no part of it. Jasper tries to pull him back in, but Mendez refuses and starts walking away alone. Jasper warns Marcos that a man like Mendez, walking off angry, could expose everything they've done. Marcos doesn't hesitate, orders the others to kill Mendez. Back at the house, Daniel is harsh with Maria over some chore, and Paul calls him out for it. Daniel snaps back that he's her owner and will treat her however he sees fit. Maria has clearly noticed the difference. Paul's kindness stands out against Daniel's cruelty. Noticed, Samuel has been watching the house and slips away to alert Marcos that Paul is with Daniel. Night, the gang regroups. Marcos is pleased. Now they have a second reason to go after Daniel. Samuel wonders if Mendez will go along with it. Jasper reminds him. That's exactly why they dealt with Mendez already. Home, Daniel finishes packing the gold. Paul reminds him of their deal. It is done, and Daniel can finish digging out the rest on his own. Tomorrow, as promised, Daniel needs to take him to the railway line. Daniel claims he's heading out to check whether the hunters have shown up nearby. Paul tenses at the mention of them. Sensing his nerves, Daniel tosses him a piece of bread to calm him down, then suddenly turns and knocks him out cold with the butt of his gun. Together with Maria, he ties Paul up. Outside, Daniel tells Maria his suspicion. Marcos already knows about Paul and the gold. His plan is to steal the hunters' horses and hide them near the river. Without horses, Marcos and his men won't survive long in this jungle. If he isn't back by tomorrow evening, Maria is to take the gold and go find his brother in the nearby village. Maria nods. Inside, Paul comes to and works himself free of the ropes. Maria finds him and starts leading him away from the house. The next day, Marcos and his gang storm Daniel's house. Empty. Furious, he heads out searching. Meanwhile, Maria is guiding a bound Paul through the jungle when he gets tangled in thick brush. She pulls him free just as Marcos and his men close in nearby, scanning the hillside. The struggle stirs the water in the swamp they're hiding in, and Marcos opens fire toward the sound. Paul and Maria manage to grab each other and stay hidden beneath the surface until the danger passes. Eventually, Marcos gives up and moves his men toward the riverbank instead. The next morning, Paul wakes up tied to a tree, with Maria bathing in the river some distance away. He seizes the moment to free himself and grabs a gun. That's when one of the hunters, Hojo, spots Maria and grabs her, forcing her along and binding her hands. Paul catches up and levels his gun at Hojo, but hesitates to shoot. The two men end up in a brutal struggle, each trying to overpower the other, until Paul finally gets to the gun first and kills him. He and Maria move on. Not long after, Marcos stumbles across Hojo's body and flies into a rage. Exhausted, Paul and Maria stop to rest in the jungle. Maria tells him her mother's locket, the one keepsake she has left of her, is missing, likely lost somewhere behind them, and she wants to go back for it. Paul tries to talk her out of it, warning her not to walk back into danger. She won't be swayed. She hands him a gun, keeps one for herself, and heads back alone. Marcos and his men find the locket first, confirming that the girl is traveling with the escaped slave. Not far from the hunters, Paul makes his way toward a rocky cliff line, but Samuel spots him and gives chase. Paul sprints and manages to disappear into the rocks. When Marcos can't locate him, he leaves Samuel to keep watch and moves off with Jasper. The moment they're gone, Samuel closes in on Paul, but a wild bear suddenly appears between them, and Samuel freezes in fear. Paul uses the distraction to bolt into the jungle. Samuel recovers enough to fire after him, wounding Paul, who barely manages to find cover. Paul spots an animal shed and stumbles inside for shelter, only for the door to slam shut and trap him in. Her cub is already locked inside, just as desperate to escape. He backs into a corner, grabbing a piece of wood to defend himself. Soon, the mother bear returns looking for her cub. Finding it trapped, she starts clawing at the ground beneath the shed to break in. That's when Maria arrives and kills the bear before it can get to Paul. She frees him, then rigs a trap across the shed's entrance so that anyone who opens it next will be killed. The two set the place on fire and head off toward open fields, with Maria supporting the wounded Paul. Marcos spots the smoke and leads his men to the shed. He orders Samuel to check inside. The moment Samuel lifts the door, the trap Maria rigged tears through his stomach. Maria brings Paul to the tent of a nomadic woman from her tribe. Using remedies passed down through her people, the woman helps Paul's wounds begin to heal, and by morning he's conscious again, thanking her for saving his life. That evening, when the woman's husband returns, Paul asks if he knows the way to the railway line. The man agrees to help, on one condition. Paul has to help him haul the dead bear back from the jungle first. Paul agrees and leaves with him. Shortly after they leave, Marcos and his men reach the tent. Maria hides beneath the drapes just in time, keeping herself and the truth of Paul's whereabouts hidden. Force answers. Marcos grabs the woman's child and threatens her. Meanwhile, Jasper is searching inside the tent and finds Maria, along with the gold she's been hiding. He drags her out. Marcos grabs the girl's face, demanding to know where Paul is, but realizes she can't speak and lets her go. In the chaos, Maria manages to slip the bag of gold out of Jasper's pocket and drop it. When Marcos spots it, he realizes Jasper has been stealing from him and shoots him on the spot. Then he throws Maria onto his horse and rides off with her. The nomad woman tries to stop him at gunpoint, but Marcos overpowers her, throws her to the ground, and sets her tent ablaze before riding away with Maria. Paul and the tribesmen return and see what's happened. They track Marcos down together and kill him, finally ending his reign of terror. Maria is freed. This time, she goes home with Paul. That's where the story ends. Which movie story do you want to hear next? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe to the channel.